All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, is there a movie that sounds more like it was made for me than this one? We are talking about a movie where the whole world starts dreaming about Nicolas Cage. This is a movie called Dream Scenario. And joining me to talk about it, we've got Petros Patsilivas from Caged in Coppola Connections podcast. And we get into a lot of puzzle pieces, a lot of Cage stuff in here, of course, but a lot of other stuff too. This one gets weird, but it's a fun one to talk about. And we'll get to that in a minute. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at PiecingPod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. Along with that, we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together. Right now, we've got episodes on, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, The Holdovers, I think maybe one or two others. A lot of Piecing It Together that hasn't been released yet on the main feed, so check it out. Also, we got bonus and advanced content from Awesome Movie Year and from my music career. Lots of great stuff. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen if you'd like to support the show in that way. And with that said, let's get into our conversation about Dream Scenario. All right, it's time to get into Dream Scenario with a man who I'm sure has had plenty of dreams about Nicolas Cage in the past. Petros from Caged in Coppola Connections. How you doing, Petros?
I'm doing very well, and you are right in the fact that I have had many a dream about Nicolas Cage. I've also lost count when was the last time I have not typed the man's name into a search bar or just had like a passing thought of him in my day-to-day life. I've even gone to the extreme lengths of creating a customized widget on my iPhone, which just pulls up a like search for him. So I have that. I have a Francis Ford Coppola one and a Willem Dafoe one because I am mentally insane, David.
That is dedication. Seriously. Wow. Yeah. Well, there's going to be a lot of search results because, I mean, obviously the man never stops working, and it's a good time to be a Nicolas Cage fan. We've been getting so many great films over these last few years, and you have been on the podcast here for some of them.
Yep.
But this one, I am super excited to talk about. It is a very interesting one. It's one that I think very clearly, and this will probably come up in some puzzle pieces, pays homage to some classic Nicolas Cage work. And, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent from last year, plays with some of his celebrity and the story of celebrity and whatnot. But I think before we get into puzzle pieces, though, we should kind of talk a little bit about this movie. Like, what do you think about like a story like this that just seems so catered to giant Nicolas Cage fans like you and I? Like, it's amazing that something like this actually would happen.
Well, it's crazy because just before talking to you, I was listening to a podcast with the director, and he said the first person they went after was Adam Sandler. And I think like that's the only other person I can see this film working with in a way. And I think like Cage is, it's amazing as a Cage fan because it feels like we are eating well. And it's Cage in like, and again, we'll get into some of the puzzle pieces, but like it's Cage in one of my favorite modes of him being in. Like there's this kind of like the line that's used throughout this film is the remarkable nobody. And I think when he's kind of playing the remarkable nobody is he's kind of like, there's three that come. There's this marks like the third time that it's like that's like the significant thing about the character, and like you can tell I'm trying to not step on some puzzle pieces here, but it's great. Obviously, it feels purpose built, and it feels weirdly more so than The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, like more personal to Cage, like to his experience. I know that he said a lot in interviews, like. And it's kind of got me racking my brains of like, is he the first celebrity who got memeified in that way? Do you know what I mean? I know like you can have a debate. Is Chuck Norris, Charlie Sheen or Nicolas Cage, but like Nicolas Cage to that point that like he is almost like bigger than the man he is, and like he's kind of
Sure.
gone past like Hollywood star to just this thing that he's like he is omnipresent in like a lot of people's lives, especially the fans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one other thing, I think it was in your letterbox review that I saw you mentioning the Nicolas Cage losing his shit YouTube video. And like that's when I think things kind of like he just got so big and such a meme, basically, like you're saying, that it was almost beyond even just being this actor or a star or anything like that. And that is definitely something that this movie, deals with. I mean, in some ways, you could even call that YouTube compilation video a puzzle piece here.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Because it is
you know,
like it's the nexus idea, and it is like this film plays upon that idea of like moments that stand with people that are just totally out of context. Like a dream is like I don't know, a subconscious
yeah,
thing out of con. Do you know what I mean? You never know the beginning or end of a dream, and like that
sure.
YouTube video, you don't know the beginning and end of that clip if you've never seen that film before. You just see Nicolas Cage go, "I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!" Like, if you haven't watched Vampire's Kiss, you're like, "What the fuck is that?" Whereas, like, and it is that kind of thing. Like in a dream, you're like, "Oh," like you can almost be like weary of who is this guy. Like I can imagine showing, yeah, like I don't know, some Gen Zers who have no kind of predisposed knowledge of Nicolas Cage, being like, I don't wanna go anywhere near that guy.
Yeah. Or I've got to figure out what the hell this is.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
one
yeah,
way
yeah,
or
yeah.
the yeah, one way or the other. But let's get to some puzzle pieces. We will start with you. What do you have for your first puzzle piece for dream scenario?
I am going to go with one that kind of this film does like almost like, uh, a flip of in a weird way, is Being John Malkovich, in the way that, like,
Hmm.
Being John Malkovich is people entering the mind of John Malkovich, and this film is nobody anyone has ever heard of, like, unless they're directly linked to him, just appearing in people's dreams. And I think Charlie Kaufman at large kind of looms over this film, and I'm sure we'll get into one other particular film. Like, but I think you like I'm not sure if this is on your list, but I think you could even like say like Synecdoche, New York, or kind of other films he's written. Like there is another one on my list as well, which is like it's not kind of subject matter wise, like it kind of plays in a realm, and it's kind of like you can imagine them being in like a shared universe. So I think being John Malkovich is kind of a big part of this film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You also have, the John Cusack character in Being John Malkovich, who's kind of like a victim to his own ego as things
Yeah.
start to, ravel out of control for him. I was also thinking about that one as well, and I might as well get this out of the way now because, yeah, I just have like a whole smorgasbord of Charlie Kaufman pieces, so let's just like do them, and that way we can move on to other things.
Lovely.
But yeah, Being John Malkovich, of course, adaptation for,
Mhm.
just he is definitely back in that kind of pathetic guy,
Yeah,
mode,
yeah.
which of course is Charlie Kaufman, the character. But you also have Anomalisa as this guy who's kind of on his press tour and kind of can't connect with anybody, and all the situations he gets himself into are, not going to go well in any way, shape, or form. And then even Charlie Kaufman's novel, Ant Kind. Now,
Mhm.
I couldn't find it. I was trying to Google it to figure out what the exact term was. Maybe you remember, but his research that is stolen from him is something like ant something that that seems like it's got to be an homage to the book Ant Kind.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it like and he's got like a play on words, doesn't he? He's like, "She better
Yeah.
not use that word." Then we get that amazing scene where he's like, "Fuck, fuck," and
Yeah.
he's like she's
Yeah.
used the she's used the quote in an article, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, there's so many, like, little bits and pieces. I definitely think you bringing up Being John Malkovich first, that is, like, the number 1 of any of this Charlie Kaufman stuff that's in here. There's the most parallels to that, but I think, all these other ones, Synecdoche as well, like you said, you could see, like, little bits and pieces. I think It's interesting that you said that the director mentioned having Adam Sandler in mind as a possibility for this story, which I could definitely see that. But in the way that it all came together, there's so many references to these Charlie Kaufman things, and you kind of have to,
Mhm.
Nicolas Cage's legacy with the Charlie Kaufman, character of Charlie Kaufman, the writer, like it's all kind of intertwined as well. So definitely that's where I'm going with my first puzzle piece here. And so we just got all of our Charlie Kaufman out on the table. We can move on to some other stuff too.
Well, even to add to that, I think there's like an element of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, especially when you get into the third act of Dream Scenario and like this kind of the idea it kind of poses of like what you can do with dreams.
Hmm.
And like it almost reminds me of that kind of like near future like
Yeah.
tech. Like that kind of like like which is like rife for a kind of story unto
Yeah.
itself. And it's like that kind of stuff. And it kind of like goes into that, yeah, just thing of like lost love and like reconnecting with people and kind of it's and yeah, and it's kind of all of those guys. I mean, that's a Michel Gondry film, and then immediately you go, oh yeah, it's what is it? Science of Sleep's in there as
Sure.
well. Like, like it's kind of it kind of feels like he's like dined out on Kaufman and Michel Gondry kind of work and gone, yeah, these are the guys I'm kind of like cribbing from here.
Y Yeah, no, absolutely. You could imagine, like, in a in that Eternal Sunshine situation, if that company got, like, bought out by Mark Zuckerberg, he'd
Yes.
erase your memories and replace them with advertisements, and, you would get exactly what happens here in Dream Scenario, so,
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting, like or your memories are
yeah.
altered that you remember, like, your 5th birthday party, but it's like, everyone was drinking Coca-Cola,
There you
like
go. Oh god, we better not give them any ideas, that's, like, too perfect, but, ugh, disgusting. Let's go on to another puzzle piece. You know what? Since we're just doing, like, this whole smorgasbord, I'm gonna move on to one in a totally different direction. To me, this is, like, the big one, that I, like, walked away from this movie, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, and it's 2012's The Hunt, with Mads Mikkelsen, the Thomas Vinterberg film. Just a phenomenal movie about this, like, nice, quiet guy. He's a teacher, and he's accused by a little girl of doing something inappropriate, and he didn't do it, and it doesn't matter whether he did it or not. As soon as the idea is out there in the open, mob mentality takes over. You could kind of get into cancel culture, which this movie is definitely playing with.
Mhm.
But, his life is basically over as soon as that gets out there. And it's really surprising, especially for like a very like youth, you know, studio like A24, like to really make a movie and put it out there that looks at the other side of this whole thing. Usually it's just, of course the whole Me Too movement was, it's a reckoning that's like long overdue, and a lot of terrible people were outed and good, throw their careers out for sure. But somebody
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
Mads Mikkelsen in The Hunt, or somebody like Nicolas Cage's character here in Dream Scenario, does the punishment fit the crime? It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very
Yeah,
sticky.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so that is a movie that I just think, deals with that so, so well, and I really think Dream Scenario does too. I think the idea that, yeah, maybe this guy, his ego is, maybe he's a little bit of a narcissist, but, for everything to kinda be taken away because he, kinda cheated on his wife a little bit, like, like, it's, like, a bit much, and it's an interesting way to look into this kind of, phenomenon that's been going on these last few years.
Well, it's interesting that that's not the thing that takes him down either, is it? It's just this kind of phenomenon, and I know that, again, the director has kind of said in interviews that he within universities, you get, like, people complaining about lecturers or their professors, and the professors kind of rationalize it, but like, "I never actually like, they have, like they've just come up with this out of nowhere." Do you know what I mean? And, like, it perfectly leads me onto a puzzle piece, I think, for this, which is, uh, Tar.
Oh,
'Cause
sure.
I think that's a film, again, that kind of takes cancel culture and kind of puts you very much in the lap of the the perpetrator of in that film ills, but what that does is like doesn't really get into it. Whereas this, like we know why he's being cancelled. It is for being in people's dreams and kind of hurting them when he's like he hasn't actually done anything. Whereas yeah, I think both of those films, and as well, like they both seem to be darkly comic in places, but like take it feels like the key note to the actors in both of them is like treat these situations like they are the most like serious thing. Like
Sure.
you get in Dream Scenario, you get like one of the biggest laughs I've had in the cinema for a couple of years in a moment that like is played so straight, but like you give me a fart gag, like you do in Dream Scenario, and I'm putty in your
Yeah,
hands.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, that's a great one. I hadn't thought of that, but that is another recent movie that, deals with it in a very surprising way, with this
Yes.
this moment right now, which yeah, a great one to bring up there. So I'm glad you got that one in there. I will go with, speaking of, Jim Carrey and Eternal Sunshine, I'll go with The Truman Show, which is a very obvious one to bring to this conversation. But, this guy who's just kind of leading a very, very normal life and then finds out that nothing is as it seems because all of a sudden, he finds out that he's on this television show and everybody's been kind of faking. And this is almost like a reverse of that in a way where it's like it's not that everything had been fake, it's just everything from here on out is this weird situation that like is very sci-fi, very unexplainable as to like how any of this they don't even try to explain it really. It's just something that happened, a phenomenon. But both movies, that person then has to deal with the consequences of nothing ever being the same ever again from that point forward, and their life is like forever changed. And the Truman Show, both hilarious and really sweet and really sad. I rewatched it a couple of years ago, and it's like way sadder than I remembered.
Yeah.
So I think it really fits in a lot of ways here with Dream Scenario.
So I guess my next one is going to be just a film that kind of nails dream logic, and I think this film like really nails it as well because there are moments within it, and you're like, "Are we?" And it kind of does that great thing of like second guessing you, like you have yourself, yeah, going like, "Oh, are we in a dream?" And like it kind of has its own built dream. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like kind of it handles dreams really well. Is Inception?
Sure.
I'm gonna go with Christopher Nolan's Inception just because I think when you're tackling stuff that involves dreams, there are a few films to look at, and I imagine Inception is one of them. And like, I know that there's subtle things done in like dream scenario. It doesn't seem there's not kind of like Vaseline lensed shots to indicate sometimes we're in a dream. Like there's a particular sequence quite early on in the film where something happens in their house, and I was like, "This is this a dream?" And then it's not until you kind of we get the next scene, you're like, "Oh no, that actually happened." And then like, do you know what I mean? You're constantly being like, "Oh, are we in a dream?" And I imagine like on rewatch there'll be subtle things to notice out for, whether it will be like, I don't know, like could be stuff like books missing from like bookshelves or
Sure,
stuff like that
sure.
in dream. Do you know what I mean? In the dreams and stuff like that, or just kind of like yeah, something like that. There's those great shots where it kind of is bouncing back in between like a dream and like what is actually happening when he's kind of asked to enact out someone's dream. Like I found like that was really great, and it kind of I don't know, it perfectly captures it, like second guesses you, but like when you're in, especially when people are explaining their dreams, it feel like that is exactly what a dream feels like. Not just in the kind of like yeah, there's a guy who explains this dream of like a barren wasteland and just people there being in bow ties and being followed by some humanoid creature and stuff like that, and there's loads of weird mushrooms and stuff like that, and it's like that is exactly what a dream is. And I think yeah, I think Inception, I always watch that movie and go, they've really got the dreams right here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, that's something that I was also wondering too, because I've only gotten to see this movie once so far. And like, are there going to be little tells as to like maybe some scenes that aren't presented as dreams actually were also dreams? I mean, a guy like this with like his kind of I want to say like light delusions of grandeur, if that's a thing.
Mhm.
His big delusions are really just like write a book. It's not even like really that big of a thing, but
Yeah.
but like maybe some of the things, with what happens to his career are imaginations. It's hard to say, but yeah, like with Inception, where there's all these different layers and layers of that, it's hard to tell where you're at any given point. I will go speaking of dreams, let's just stay on topic. I'll go with Nightmare on Elm Street, a very
Oh,
obvious one.
yeah.
Directly referenced in the movie, when Paul is basically asked to, wear a Freddy glove for marketing his new book. But also, like, it really just is because he, ends up everybody, this is spoiler alerts, around on this podcast, but the trailer sets it up as it's all about dreams, but those dreams end up turning into nightmares. And so Nicolas Cage is, terrifying everybody in their nightmares by the
Yeah.
midway point of this film, which is when everything starts to turn for him and when essentially he's canceled. But th-
This could act like a kind of backdoor, like, like Freddy Krueger origin story. Do
sure,
you know what I mean? You can imagine like a kind of like, do you know what I mean? Like a 2023 version of that, of like, do you know what I mean? Go, well, no, no, no. He wasn't the guy we said he was in the original films. This is what actually had, like, do you know what I mean? In 2023, he was a guy who got cancelled and then sought his revenge, like, on the younger generations. Because the people in this who have like the biggest issue with him are the kind of, do you know what I mean? Like a few generations behind him. It is the kind of like university student
sure.
level who have that scene where they can't even look at a photo of him, or he like kind of steps into the room and it play, yeah, the horror in this is, I think it's a weird film to pigeonhole, right? Like I'm not sure what it's listed as in the kind of genre, but my local cinema had it listed as a horror comedy. And I
Hmm.
was like, I guess it is.
Yeah.
I guess, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing really horrific, but I think when you uh think about it for more than a second, just like being in Paul Matthews' shoes, that's like quite horrific. Like if you think, if that happened to me, like especially that thing of, I don't, like, and just on that kind of micro level of somebody like misinterpreting something you said and like
Yeah.
them being annoyed with you, like just on a kind of like one-to-one basis is kind of frustrating enough. But
Yeah.
like getting to the point he gets to when like he's sincerely apologizing, and like even that they say it's like self-serving
I
and
love that
he's a
part.
bad guy for
Yeah, I love that
that.
part because, like, that's something that, like, there's simply again, like, it's a touchy subject, but, like, there is no apology that will ever work in any of these situations. It's just
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's never accepted, and so, like, just showing that, like, yeah, you could tell as he's doing it that no one's gonna accept it because it just seems like he's going overboard a little bit, but you could also tell he really does mean it at the time, but, of course, it's not accepted, but yeah, I love that moment, but yeah, you could totally see this as like a 21st century Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'm sure we'll be getting any day now, but let's go on to another puzzle piece. What do you got next?
My next one, I'm gonna go high-minded here,
Mm.
and the thinkings of Carl Jung
Oh,
and
yeah.
the ideas that like kind of, that there is a collective consciousness between us, and kind of where the kind of wellspring of dream scenario comes from, and the fact that like in Carl Jung, I think, noticed that like the umbrella was created in like different places in the world at the exact same time, like similar time. And like there's no way of people of knowing that someone else had done that, or like the fact that throughout cultures, stories are very similar.
Yeah.
Like even though like ancient stories and stuff like that, like whether it's, I don't know, different cultures explaining why the sun comes up and goes down and how they are the same, and like, yeah, there is this collective consciousness. And I think this film taps into that idea of like the collective consciousness, and Paul Matthews being for some reason the thing that people dream up. And like, yeah, I think yeah, I think that's a, I know that is one as well. I've heard the director talk about that, so I feel like I'm cheating here.
Well, it seriously, it definitely belongs in this conversation. I also think it probably is a pretty big influence on a lot of these other puzzle pieces we're talking about here. Certainly Charlie Kaufman's stuff, even Nightmare on Elm Street, really. Like, like it's the idea of the shared experience between people. Like, it's definitely something that a lot of the people who make these kinds of movies, I think, are all going back to those Carl Jung, ideas and philosophies and whatnot. So definitely, I think that's a great one to bring up. Um, I will go with, you mentioned, and this kind of goes back to, some of the things we've already been talking about with the, you know, getting canceled, I guess. But we talked about Adam Sandler, but I'm gonna go with Punch Drunk Love as a puzzle piece here. The idea of this guy, he gets himself into this situation, and he's just like he's thinking it through. Should I do this thing that I know is probably a bad idea, but the situation has presented itself to me right now, and in this case, it's this girl who just absolutely wants his attention because she had an amazing sex dream about him, and wants him to come and like basically recreate it in real life. And then for Adam Sandler, it's calling this phone sex line. And as soon as they do this one thing that they probably shouldn't do, but they're like, maybe I'll just let myself do it. Everything goes to hell from that point forward. And so it's kind of a similar thing for both characters, and they're both actors that which is again why I think it's so interesting that this director had Adam Sandler in mind at one point. They're both actors you love to see fuck up, basically, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
suffer those consequences.
That they both play like a loser really well, and it's like they only kind of get like the chance every now and then. And like, I think I said it in my Letterboxd review. Like Nicolas Cage, when he gets to like do these films that are kind of like personal to him, but like, yeah, unlike the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, aren't about him. So like, I think like Pig's a big example. Like
Yeah,
that feels more autobiographical to like Nicolas Cage's life, and the fact that it's like a chef who has been out in the literal wilderness for like 10 years or whatever.
yeah,
And like Nicolas Cage literally spent the 2010s in the kind of film wilderness, straight in like VOD or straight to DVD movie, yeah, like sphere. So I think like and him getting to play losers, which yeah leads me on to a puzzle piece and a film that I think is quite slept on for a lot of people when it comes to Nicolas Cage, and I know that it has had issues with like the edit of it, and I know the director has said in the past that like he has a better version of this film, and it is Army of One. It
mm,
is Nicolas Cage and my kind of yeah in that mode I love him in playing like and it kind of comes back to this because it's this kind of remarkable nobody in extraordinary circumstances, which is a kind of like draws back to um Punch Drunk Love as well, right? It's
sure,
this thing of like a normal guy who kind of ends up in weird and wonderful circumstances. So like in that film, it's what Nicolas Cage being a carpenter who decides to go try and kill Osama bin Laden
yeah,
in Pakistan, and it's like, which is based on facts. That is
yes, yeah,
is a guy who tried to do this, so not just a crazy idea for a film. But I think yeah, like when Cage gets to do, and it's all he goes into like this nasally voice as well. I love it when he kind of does that, and he does it with like Paul Matthews as well. And like I don't know what it is about that mode of Cage. I kind of like the fact he doesn't do it all the time, but at the same time, I love it when it happens. If you know what I mean, it seems to
sure.
be like rarefied gold.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see if that different cut eventually comes out, because it was such a great idea, that movie. It just didn't quite work out, and so it would be really interesting
Well,
to
if you look at
see.
who produced it, you'll see why it got butchered.
Yeah. Oh boy. But yeah, I think you could, you brought up Pig on the way in there. I think you could definitely throw Pig on the list as well, as far as characters like this who, they kind of like You kind of imagine this character's life going forward might, mirror that a little bit, where he's gonna have to, like, claw his way back to anything resembling a life here from the events of Dream Scenario. But, yeah, I think for my next one, I'm gonna actually let's just stay on the Nicolas Cage train here and, bring up Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent as a puzzle piece. I mean, we've kind of talked around it a little bit already, but, 2 different angles of looking at just the ridiculousness of celebrity and what it means to be
Mhm.
famous and to have that limelight on thrust on you, and how that changes a person, and then once it's taken away, how that changes a person and the ups and downs of that whole thing. Totally different movies in tone and, like, what they're exactly exploring, but both do come back to that exploration of celebrity, and it's an interesting, I guess, kinda meta era that Cage is in, with his kind of comeback these last few years of actually getting some, like, really great roles, that he's getting
Mm.
these chances to explore that, because I'm sure it's something, that's on his mind a lot, and so I'm sure he's really relishing in a chance to kind of show people, like, I'm very aware of, the ups and downs of my career and
Uh-huh.
what people say about me. And these are examples of that in these movies. These are absolutely allegories or metaphorical for what I've been through. And the unbearable weight of massive talent rules. So for sure.
I'm gonna kind of yeah stay on that train of like kind of characters and like the way that they kind of I don't know like there seems to be connective tissue to this film is king of comedy. I think there's definitely that like somebody who like again it's that ego thing and it is that some like somebody in that case well it's basically just throughout the film just daydreaming about like a life that he doesn't have, right?
Yeah.
And like kind of Rupert Pupkin kind of like, yeah like having these I don't know, fantasies in his basement where he's on TV shows and stuff like that, and he's like the number one guy, and he's living this dream. And I think Paul Matthews is kind of that at much lower stakes, right? He kind of has this big dream of being a published author for a book about ants,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, and I think it is a film that kind of talks about fame, and it's kind of I think that, like, even Christopher Borgli's previous film, Sick of Myself, it seems to be something that he's really, like, wants to take a scalpel to is fame and consumerism and, like yeah, there's that great moment in, Dream Scenario where you have that essentially an advert for what the tech will be to, like, Inception people and advertise to them, which kind of, like, left me feeling like, "Fuck, that's 5 years away, isn't it?" That is
Yes.
that I'm gonna see I'm gonna see these influencers I've never heard of, just all of a sudden they're in my dreams selling me something.
It's so true. It's so absolutely true. That actually is I kinda jumped around out of order in my pieces. My last piece that I have here, really does focus more on that tech and, adding advertisements into dreams. I thought of Her, Spike Jonze' Her, which kind of takes you back to all the Charlie Kaufman stuff.
Yes.
But, it definitely feels like something that would be in that world of that very near future sci-fi of, things you could totally see that we're just 5 years away from, and, it's really funny in the way that skewers, not only tech, but, social media and influencer culture and all
Mhm.
those things, like, they all kinda converge there in that whole sequence, and, really funny stuff all around, and you could totally picture it in a movie like Her that they would be, in tandem with that operating system, they'd be like creating everything is an advertisement delivery platform. So,
Mhm.
of course, you'd get ads like this and that too.
Yeah, like, I think this, Her, and, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind feel like they're kind of in some, like, shared universe. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, in this kind of yeah, like, I don't know what it would be, like, the kind of offbeat comedy, future tech, night do you know what I mean? It's kind of I don't they all kind of feel, I think, yeah, I guess this is a puzzle piece. Well, just the concept of Black Mirror, right? Just like
Sure.
this in another, this kind of in a shorter form is an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
I think like that you can imagine Charlie Brooker's probably watched this film and gone, fuck, like that's so great. Like, why didn't we come up with that idea? Like as like a kind of cancel coach. I imagine it would have been a little bit more heavy handed as like a cancel culture analogy. Like, whereas this is like, I don't know, it as much as that is there, like, do you know what I mean? It's got references to like, well, we can get you on Joe Rogan, which I particularly enjoyed, like
Yeah.
that. And I'm not sure if it is like just my mind or like when they say, "Oh, for some reason you're really big in France," like felt like a Roman Polanski joke, like
Sure.
because obviously like
Yep.
ever since his exile from the US, it's just like every movie has been funded by France.
So true.
So
So true. Yeah. No, I caught references to, I think, a lot of canceled people in the way that was dealt between that one and, like you said, we can get you on Joe Rogan and all the right
yeah,
wingers and all that stuff. So yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
Tucker Carlson wants to speak to you.
yeah, it's not subtle, but it's also handled really well and very funny. So I thought it was great. Do you have any other puzzle pieces you wanted to throw on the list?
Yes, there is one which is a book, and it is John Ronson's "So You've Been Publicly Shamed,"
Okay.
which is a book about people who it was kind of written before kind of cancel culture was kind of like the de rigueur thing. Do you know what I mean? Before a big thing, and it kind of looks at people who and like some of one of the case studies in the book is somebody who just wrote an offhand, like, jokey tweet and, like, like, got on a flight, and before they knew it, like, their life had fallen apart, they'd
Mhm.
lost their job, they were kind of enemy number 1 on social media and stuff like that. So I think a book like that and, like, yeah, I think just this feels like I don't know, I can imagine, like, John Ronson himself getting a big kick out of watching, like, Dream Scenario. It feels like a kind of, I don't surrealist take on that book, just
Sure.
kind of looking at the idea of, yeah, people I don't know, yeah, especially, like, in academia and stuff like that, kind of falling from grace and trying to try like, what do they do next, like, and especially in that case of the a few of the examples in that book, like the one I was talking about, like, if a comedian had done that tweet, like, they would have been absolutely fine, but for some reason, this woman, like, it's a bad taste joke, but, like, if it do you know what I mean? If it was said by Ricky Gervais, like, do you know what I mean? Far worse things have been said by Ricky
Sure,
Gervais,
sure.
and he's been allowed to get away with it, whereas, like, yeah, this person and it kind of that was kind of in my mind a lot whilst watching this film of, like, because you are put in you're put the seat next to Paul Matthews, and you're very much sympathetic to him, right? In the fact that, like, he hasn't done anything wrong, like, and like it is interesting in that way to kind of, I don't know, not I don't think it's going to change anyone's minds on cancel culture because I don't think that cancel culture actually exists. It is like
Sure.
it's it's consequence culture more than anything. Do you
Yes.
know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, and as we see, like a lot of people don't get cancelled; they just move to new platforms where their views are accepted.
Yeah.
Or do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Join me on Rumble,
Oh
guys. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
totally, totally. No, and I mean that brings you back to when I brought up The Hunt earlier. Like, it's surprising that they would make a movie like this because, and I think that's the thing. Like, we're obviously both on the same side of the way we think about that, But it's
Yeah, yeah,
like you can't even have the conversation though a lot of the times because it's so incredibly black or white. And this movie
yes.
dares to be in the gray area of that, and I think that that's refreshing and exciting, and that's part of what I really liked about it. And, I don't know, as we get more removed from things, like, maybe there'll be more room for those kinds of conversations, but I feel like this is leading the way in a way.
And I think this film as well will kind of stand the test of time because it's not. It kind of it touches on those things, and it kind of it does have jokes that are kind of the moment
Mhm.
and stuff like that with the Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, but at the same time, like, it is an interesting idea in itself. Like, do you know what I mean? The elevator pitch of this is do you know what I mean? Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's just a regular guy
Yeah.
haunting people's dreams. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of the greatest elevator pictures, whereas, like, it's not like, I don't know, like a thinly veiled thing of like, do you know what I mean? Like, Tar kind of does have that thing where it kind of feels a bit like it's a bit of it could be a bit of this person, a bit of that, or like the kind of archetype of the cancelled person, whereas this is just like, it's a fun concept, and it does also talk about that as one element, and
Sure.
as well as kind of fame as a kind of amorphous thing as itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'll read down our list of puzzle pieces, then we'll get into some closing thoughts here on Dream Scenario. We talked about practically every Charlie Kaufman movie. Then we also talked about The Hunt, Tar, The Truman Show, Inception, Nightmare on Elm Street, Carl Jung, Punch Drunk Love, Army of One, Pig, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, The King of Comedy, Her, Black Mirror, and the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed. A lot of interesting stuff here, getting just kind of all over, a lot of weird things in here. I don't know. I think that's why I connected so much with this, just because it just brought me back to a lot of really, near future sci-fi. I really love that stuff about it. I love this cancel culture commentary. I love Nicolas Cage. I mean, come on, he's so much fun in this
Mhm.
role. And like you said, there's some like really big laughs in this, especially when things are not going so well for him. But any closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't quite get to that you wanted to bring up with Dream Scenario?
No, yeah, to echo your thoughts, it is kind of it kind of taps into all these weird things that I like, and one of the things I gleaned in my, like, research for it is, like, they did 2 test audience screenings just to find out how the hell to market this movie, because it is kind of like you're saying, it kind of draws in from all this stuff, and it's like, what is it? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Like, is it a horror? Like, where is it, like, leaning? So I think, like, A24 are like, "How do we sell this, like, movie?" Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I think it's got one of the best taglines of the year, which is "Meet the man of your dreams." Like,
yeah,
which for me is like, he's been the man of my dreams for years. Like, so hopefully everyone else will get on board and, like, uh, jump aboard the Nick Cage train. Like,
yeah,
and it's kind of heartening to see, like, uh, here in the UK, like, it's getting a really wide release. Like, I expected to see it in, like, a more art house cinema, and it's kind of playing in the multiplexes, and it's like, oh, this is great. Like, it's great to see A24 at that level, and it's great to see, like, do you know what I mean? Like, Nicolas Cage, especially, like, even this year, we thought Nicolas Cage after Pig was coming back to the multiplex, but I don't know, we seem to be getting one a year, and the rest seems to be,
yeah.
like, drifting onto VOD still.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, no, this one it seems to be going out wide, and it's going to be interesting to see as it continues, getting out there, how people react to it. But yeah, I think that does it for Dream Scenario. Is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Well, I was lucky enough last weekend, time of recording, to go to the Brighton Film Festival, and I caught a double bill of Poor Things and The Boy and the Heron, which were
Oh,
kind of homework for one of my other podcasts, which is getting Defoe, him being in Poor Things, and even though I saw the original language Boy and the Heron, kind of watching it with the idea of, I know Defoe has been cast for the dub of this, and I want to
right.
see what character he is playing, and it is always a joy to see a Miyazaki film on the big screen. So yeah, I'd recommend, as soon as those films are out, to rush out and see them. Poor Things, I think, if you want Tim Burton but really fucking horny, it's the movie for you.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. Oh, man. Well, if any of our listeners are starting to dream about Nicolas Cage on a regular basis, where can they find your podcast and listen to a whole bunch of conversations about Cage and other Coppola-related things?
So you can find me on all the socials, which is Caged in Pod, or you can find me wherever you find podcasts. The podcast's on like a bit of a hiatus at the moment, just whilst I'm trying to figure out balancing two podcasts.
Mm,
As I mentioned there, Getting Dafoe is the other podcast where we talk about all things Willem Dafoe, which I co-host with Daryl Edge, who's also an alumni of this podcast.
yeah.
So, Caged In's coming back. I've got some interviews coming up with people who've worked with Nicolas Cage, people who've written books on Nicolas Cage and stuff like that. So, January, I'm hold me to that. If you're listening to this, pester me, and I'm trying to get stuff in the bank so I can kind of release stuff coming January. But there is a whole plethora of stuff. We mentioned Pig in this episode. There is I think the only person out there who kind of changed his podcast for a little bit to be called the Pig Cast, where I interviewed anyone I could from that movie. So that is the director, producers, cast members, and also the the chef who was Nicolas Cage's coach to look
Wow.
like a chef in that movie. So if you want someone going granular on all things Nicolas Cage, this is the podcast for you.
Incredible. Great stuff. Well, hey, thank you so much, Petros, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
Hey, it's Ashley Ray, and I host the podcast TV I Say. Have you ever referred to television as your friend? Do you want 10 more seasons of And Just Like That? Did you rewatch every episode of King of Queens in 2020? Then this is the podcast for you. Join me and a new guest each week to discuss your favorite TV shows and my 90 Day Fiancé hot takes and my Below Deck hot takes and basically all my TV hot takes. Listen to TV I Say wherever you listen to your podcasts.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Dream Scenario. Thank you to Petros for joining me on that one, and thank you to you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, of course, make sure you are subscribed, and also maybe drop us a little 5-star rating and review, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Good Pods or Spotify. It would be very helpful in making sure more people check out the show. Like I told you at the top, we got a lot of podcasts on the way. You could, of course, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, join our Facebook group Popcorn at Puzzle Pieces, check out that Produced by David Rosen Patreon at patreon.com/by David Rosen. All these links are in the show notes, of course. And lots of news coming. It's December now. I have a lot of news coming on my music. I am going to be releasing a lot of music in 2024. So keep an eye out for that. I might have to do a special piecing it together bonus episode just talking about my music plans because there's a lot on the way. Speaking of my music, I'm not going to play some of that new stuff. It's a movie called Dream Scenario. I gotta go back to one of my most popular songs ever, a song called Dreams Like These. This is from my second album, An Unseen Sky. There's a music video for it on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/music by David Rosen. And this song has made its way onto a lot of playlists, which has gotten it picked up and listened to by many, many people. Hundreds of thousands even. And by far my most successful song. So I hope you enjoy it. The album An Unseen Sky is available everywhere you can find music, and we'll be back with more piecing it together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.